Recording in progress.
Thank you, everyone, for giving us a few moments there and making sure that we were prepared for tonight's General Committee meeting. I'll call the General Committee meeting to order for January 24th, 2024. The meeting's being held in person and electronically in accordance with the Municipal Act. The first item on the agenda is the consent agenda. For the consent items, I'll read out the title associated with the recommended motions printed on the agenda. Members of General Committee may ask that an item be held to discuss it further. If an item isn't held, the motion is deemed to be approved on consent. No further discussion of the item will take place at General Committee, and the recommended motions will go forward to the next City Council meeting for consideration. Before we get into the reports of reference and begin that business, I also want to take an opportunity to recognize Hayden Jack, who's over my left shoulder here. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And to Mackenzie Bentley, welcome back to General Committee and City Council, and you have the exciting budget meeting to be participating. So I'm going to go over to the affordability report from January 17th, 2024, which is to be received following some comments from the Chair, Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. The Affordability Committee was held Wednesday, January 17th. It was called to order by myself at 6:35. The following committee members were present: Deputy Mayor Robert Thompson, myself, and Councillor Harris. We also had non-committee members present: Councillor Rietma, Councillor Congo, Councillor Corser, and Councillor Negussi, as well as 13 staff members there to assist us. We met for the purpose of a public meeting, which was regarding an application for an amendment to the zoning bylaw at 290, regarding 290 Cundles Road East in Ward 3. Vanessa Simpson of Innovative Planning Solutions advised that the purpose of the public meeting was to review an application submitted by Innovative Planning Solutions on behalf of 273-5528 Ontario Inc. for a zoning bylaw amendment for the lands known municipally as 290 Cundles Road East. There was a slide presentation discussing about 8 different topics and concerns, which was followed by Andrew Gamiro, Senior Planner for the City of Barrie, who provided an update concerning the status of the application. He advised that the primary planning and land use matters are currently being reviewed by the technical review team, and Mr. Gamiro commented on the concerns received from the public, which will be addressed in the staff report. And the anticipated timeline staff will report back regarding the proposed application. Councillor Kungle, the Ward 3 councillor, asked a number of questions to Ms. Simpson and the applicant, Mr. David Seaman of Cal Park Developments, to which city staff received responses. The meeting adjourned at 7:03 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nixon, for that summary of the meeting. So that report is to be received. So we will consider that received at this point and move on to the staff reports. CAM 001-24, funding requests, emergency retaining wall reconstruction and asset management plan update. That's approved on consent. And the EMT 001-24, 2024 business plan and budget, service partners.
Hold, please.
That's being held by Councillor Harvey. And as there's no other matters being held this evening, we'll jump right into that. So Councillor Harvey, the chair is yours, or the seat is yours, the microphone is yours, the floor is yours. It's all yours.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I'll put it on the floor as printed, and I do have a motion to put on the floor that I request that paragraph 1 be separated concerning the police services budget from the rest of the recommendations, so they'll be able to participate in the discussion of paragraphs 2 to 8.
Thank you, Councillor. There's an amendment on the floor to separate out paragraph 1 from the rest of the report in order that a conflict can be cited on just paragraph 1. Are any questions or comments on that amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor? It is approved, so we'll deal with number 1 separately. Let's deal with the body between 2 and, you'd like to declare the conflict now on it?
No, actually, it's entirely up to yourself what order you want to take them, and that's all I was going to say. It's up to you what order you want to take them as to when I declare.
Yeah, let's deal with the body of it if we can, in terms of 2 to 8, and then we'll come back to number 1 at the end, where you actually have to declare your conflict.
Sure, sounds good. Do I still have the floor then, or?
If you'd like it, you can have it.
Okay. So I do have an amendment, and that's in regards to paragraph 2, that the following amendment be added, that the contract support for information referral and community navigation position be funded through external grant funding, and that the tax levy be reduced by $78,388 or $387.
And the floor is yours.
Thank you. And actually, unfortunately, Councillor Harris isn't here because I was going to give him some kudos, because obviously through the presentation and with our counterparts from the county being here last week, it was suggested to have some conversations in regards to the funding for this position, and it was rather quickly how we found out that sure enough there is funding available for this. So the library is just having to go through the application process, and it sounds like this has actually opened up the door for other libraries throughout the county too for funding of a similar position, opposed to it going back on to the municipal taxpayer a second time. So those are my comments, and I will leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Riepma?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm also supportive of the fact that the county looks like they are going to be able to fund that position. You'll notice on your list that I have a similar motion to Councillor Harvey's, with the exception that my motion suggests that the $78,000 be put back into the library budget for their collection. And so I don't know exactly what the process would be, but I suppose I would ask that we defeat this motion and pass mine. I guess that's maybe the process involved.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. I think that the amendment would be in contravention of the original amendment that's being moved. So I would deal with the original amendment first, and if that amendment fails, then we would move on to your amendment there.
Yes. Just speaking to this situation then, I guess I'm asking councillors to not support this amendment, but support mine. And the reason for it is that I thought the library was very thoughtful when they brought forward their budget, and they had a budget for library materials, and they reduced it by $100,000, and then added in the $78,000 in order to accommodate the social worker. And they did that in an effort to minimize the impact on the tax base. They've now that we have money coming from the county for the social worker, I think that it's important that we put some, not all, of that money back into the collection. And I see it as a bit like your car. If you're not maintaining your collection, I mean, that's what you've got to offer to the public. And the collection replacement and improvement costs are increasing every year. They're affected by inflation as well. And frankly, if you don't keep the maintenance up on your car, sooner or later, your car is not going to work very well. And I think that we need to support our library in this way, so that over time we don't have a collection that is degraded. And that's the thinking behind what my motion does. So I'd ask for support on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kungl, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I won't be supporting the amendment as presented. I'm aligned with Councillor Rietma, but overall, we've had, I think, conversation in the previous meetings about the request for that $78,000. I would like to leave it in the budget and actually direct it the same to library materials. I'll speak to it now anyways, in case I'm not able to, or it's limited later. But I've really appreciated the responsiveness of the Barrie Public Library, especially over the last 24 hours, and getting a lot of questions answered. And we're digging into broader aspects about the budget and reserves and whatnot. So I like that this came back as an area of focus by which they've clarified some pieces. New information has come to light. I think that Councillor Gary Harvey has spoken to around Simcoe County may be able to support the original ask tied to the navigator. But I would rather see the money left there for now for future conversations, knowing that there's other areas of the budget that they came to the table with to say, you know, we want to show you that we've tried to save in some areas, but it still comes at a cost to them. And so I won't be supporting it and would like to see the retention of that $78,000.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other, Councillor Nixon?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I have a bit of an issue with supporting it as well. I certainly understand the fiscal responsibilities. I look at it in another way, that if that additional person, that additional position wasn't necessary and was never in there in the first place, that money wouldn't be spent. Right now it's not being spent because we're getting someone else to pay for it. But at the end of the day, it's I think it's very important that that their materials budget keeps up with what they require. And as mentioned, once maybe you reduce that by a certain amount, that certainly affects their their ability to provide service to their clients and their members. The library I think is critical to our downtown core. It's the only building service provider that we have left in the downtown, where people can come and not just rent books, but they can come and do. I'm not making a sales pitch for the library, but I think it's very important as more of a community center than an actual just a library. So I would like to see them receive what they need to keep their inventory up to date, and so I don't think I'll be supporting it at this point.
Councillor Corser.
To jump on the bandwagon, I would not be supporting this either. I think that was brought forward because it was a position that was kind of in a crisis mode, that they needed some supports in that area. If they can, and it was a sacrifice to their collection that they needed this position. If they can find the funding somewhere else, then by all means, I believe that money should be put back into the coffers of their collection. As we all know at this table, that the economic pressures on our community are significant, and the services and the lending library at the library is quite an impressive collection, and I know of kids that get school projects done because they're able to borrow things like telescopes from the library, and I think that it's such an important part of our community when our community is under such pressures, financial pressures. Raising family is not cheap these days. I think that money did definitely go back into the library to support our community and our families in our community as well. So I will not be supporting it. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I will be supporting the amendment for a few reasons. So this amendment isn't on, like, the library isn't a great place and part of our community and stuff. It's a fiscally responsible thing. So in 2022, the budget of the library, other than grants and fees, was $9,373,110, and the request was $9,601,329 for 2023, which this council approved a 0% increase to the budget, which then took it back to the thing. And if you look at today's binder, the budget was actually inflated by the amount, and then the ask this year is for 5.53%, which actually puts the 0% back into the budget from the previous year. If you look at the top of their expenses, it's actually 2.1 to run their organization. So it's basically putting back the 228, let's say 230,000 back into their base budget. And then if you look on their material budget, without the position request in 2022 to 2023, the board reduced their purchasing of materials on their own without a request for people or a position in a crisis and stuff, and I understand. So the board has asked for this position, and we've found a way to fund it. So I look at our staff and the intake forms that they present and what we do, and we hold people here, to a very, very high standard. And I don't think that we should then add something that we already found another funding formula with. And to be honest, next week I may have a request to reduce it to what the actual amount is to run the library. The library, to some of the information we received, has about $2.7 million in the reserve. And, we can talk about reserves and healthiness and, there's sick leave and stuff and there's, but the reality is healthy reserves like this is an overtaxation of our people. So I really just, they were held to a 0% in 2023, and they asked the board to cover it from the reserves, which they didn't. Now, I would like to see a little bit more detail in their budgeting to see where they reduce spending on their ask, which, this budget has 100,000 less of material, but they reduced it in 2022 to 2023. So right now, I will support this amendment as it actually gives them more money than it costs to run their organization, which is going to be about $246,000 over what the ask to keep and maintain their services, which this council approved of our own staff, to maintain the services and not have service cuts, which this still allows the library to do. So I will be in support of the amendment that Councillor Harvey has put on the floor.
Any other questions or comments from members of committee? Councillor?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Nuttall, I'm trying to run Rob's numbers here and just want to make sure that I've got it. So, Deputy Mayor Thompson, can you just repeat? So it was 246,000 already increased over last year, essentially, right? Is that your numbers?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall. So the increase, the cost from 2023 budget is 10,214,293.
Yep.
And then the ask for this year is 10,400, or sorry, not the ask, that's the actual expense. Sorry. And then, which is 254,000. The ask is 517, so it leaves, like I said, I was just doing some math on the fly. So the ask last year was 2.43%. Mm-hmm. This year it's doubled. Mm-hmm. So if you take that, the work we did last year will then go back into their budget. So going forward, the base budget of the library will always increase by that amount.
Okay.
So, like I said, it's not removing money to have them operate at current levels and do what they need to do. And you know, look, we're in financial trouble. Like in a lot of our, you know, we're doing our best, but I believe, you know, sometimes you got to look at programming. Like we had lengthy debates on staffing, on positions, and you know, I just think we need to do that.
Thank you for that clarification. Just quick math, it's tricky for me. This is a tough one, and that actually changes a little bit for me. And, you know, I want to be clear that I do wholeheartedly support the library. You know, I've, since meeting with them one-on-one, have done some of my own research, and, you know, data shows every dollar invested in the library reaps about a $5 on average economic return locally. So investment in the library, I think, is a good thing. That being said, the board also came to us with a budget request, and it's our job to hold them to account, to ensure, you know, effective use of the dollars. It's not to dictate how they should be spending their funding and to get involved in operations. So they came with an ask. They've asked for $78,000. We found the $78,000 for the role that the board had prioritized through the Simcoe County, which we are, you know, hopeful that that's going to come to fruition. So for me to sit here now and determine, well, I'm still going to give them that money because they need it, that's really not my role, I don't think. I think the board has been comfortable coming to us, asking for a number. They've had a trend now of reduction in materials. I don't know if they need more money in that. They didn't come to that. And I think if that was really the priority, they should have held the line on it. So I'm kind of in agreement. You know, we have done such a thorough job at our own staff holding them to account and holding the line in operations and 0% increases. We've spent hours on that. So I'm not going to sit here simply say, yep, you know, they've come to ask for this increase. We're going to give it to them. I'd like to know if we're giving them the $78,000, exactly how it's going to be utilized. So I'm tending to actually, and now that I've heard some updated numbers as well, and I'll pull up our old budget because I do want to just double check some of that math. But right now I'm in agreement and will be supporting the amendment as proposed.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I think it's important. This has nothing to do with whether you like the library or dislike the library. This is all about looking at a budget, dollars and cents, and being fiscally responsible. An ask came to council, and now we've found a different revenue stream to be able to cover that ask. So why we would, whether it's library or anybody, just makes no sense that you would still give them that money along with find them funding to cover that same ask. That's fiscally irresponsible in my world. So that's kind of where I come from, and I do appreciate Deputy Mayor pointing out a few things, because I know him and I had quite a lengthy conversation on this one earlier today too, and it really comes down to prioritizing that money. And as Councillor Hamilton mentioned last week with the county, a fee for value, and like, I mean, you don't just keep giving somebody extra money just because they're nice people. Like, the board made decisions. We're dealing with their ask. We found another revenue stream. Why we would continue to still give them that money even though we found another revenue stream to cover it just makes no sense to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'm actually going to maybe dive in a little bit on this one. I haven't, and Councillor Kungle, when you were speaking, you said that you'd received a lot more information. I actually haven't received the information I've requested. And that's why I turned to the Deputy Mayor and said, did you receive more information that I don't know about? Because for me, I just haven't received it. So I'll be, very transparent on what I've requested, because maybe it can be provided before next Wednesday's meeting, and then I'm going to go into a previous meeting I had with the library and discuss this specific request. I've asked for draft financials for 2023, recognizing that there can be a variance on draft financials. I think it's important that we understand where the library is today and where it's going moving forward, and the impacts of past decision-making as we create new decisions going forward. The other thing I've asked for, and I might have received this in late, and Eric, I'm looking to you, we'll check, is 5 years of reserve transfers and where those reserve transactions came from. So to me, if there's money that's being provided by the City of Barrie and it moves into a surplus position for the library, and then those dollars are then moved into a reserve fund, the idea that then there's at some point a deficit and it needs to be made up for makes sense. But if there are surpluses that are moved into a reserve fund, but then there's a deficit and the deficit can't be made up with, well, that sounds like a really good deal. And I want that deal in my life. So we need to make sure that the same rules apply on the intakes as they do the outtakes, on the revenues as they do the expenditures. It's the same level of expectation and demands that we have for our public servants here in the City of Barrie. And I think the library does incredible work. My children both went there last year, and we're doing tutoring at the end of the COVID lockdowns. It was a partnership between the school board and the library, and my children were invested in. And I love that. And it means I got a conflict on this, but I don't actually have a conflict on it. But as we move back from those questions that I need answered, because I really want to understand how their finances are controlled, I have a bigger issue. I actually honestly have an issue with a meeting that I had previously where I asked, and I think I mentioned this last week, I asked the library to look into the county for the funding of this social worker or support worker. And that was, Deputy Mayor, what was the date of that meeting? Any idea? November, December? December, maybe? It wasn't in January, that's for sure. It was before Christmas. And between then and now, there wasn't the work done to get that support worker, that social worker. And in 48 hours after being requested in public, it was funded. That's a management issue, folks. That is a management issue. That tells me that the City of Barrie is the easy street to get money. And I just don't think it's acceptable. I want to provide more money for materials, for programming, for things that are going to have an impact on children and families and even those who are vulnerable in our community. Part of that contract between us and those who are running the service needs to be that every dollar is used to its greatest benefit and that no rock is unturned for funding. Just like it's not unturned here in the City of Barrie. So I personally need more information, and I need to understand not just the actual financials, but I need to understand why there wasn't more work put into securing what was secured in 48 hours over the past 2 months. And that's where I'm at tonight. So I can be persuaded, I gotta be honest with you, I can be persuaded between this week and next week to provide additional funding for things that matter in the community. And at the same time, I need to be persuaded that there's no rock left unturned related to funding for the library. So I'll be supporting the amendment tonight, and I guess we'll see where all the information lies coming into next week's City Council meeting. Any other questions or comments? I think I saw Councillor Corser's hand. Councillor.
Yes, just for clarification, I understand that the library did have a meeting with Simcoe County regarding that position, and the Simcoe County provided them at that meeting only the assistance of writing an RFP to put out to public tender for that position. They did not offer up a position, assistance, financial assistance, or a body for that position until we called it out publicly last week during the meeting.
Well, I think that would be great information to get in writing from both organizations to understand, because I am left perplexed that we fund it already through the county, left perplexed that it wasn't dealt with prior to, and perplexed that it took 48 hours to deal with. So I think that, you know, you're saying hold the county to account the same way I'm holding the library to account, and I agree, 100%. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment? And it carries. On the main motion as amended, are there any other amendments? Councillor Hamilton.
Yes, I have another amendment to put forward to add the following paragraph, that the Barrie Public Library Board be requested to identify 3 to 5 performance goals reflecting key performance indicators of the city and the Barrie Public Library Board, with the goals being established by the end of May. And 2, that the Barrie Public Library CEO provide a presentation outlining the key performance indicators to the Finance and Responsible Governance Committee in October of 2024. And I can speak to that as well.
Councillor, the floor is yours.
I think as, you know, as we sit here talking about the library budget, I don't think any of us are arguing about the importance of the library or the value of the library or, you know, the community hub that the library supports. But for me, when someone asks me, you know, how well is the library performing, I don't actually know, right? And they offered a wonderful presentation that said, you know, library membership is up and in-person visits are up, but up compared to what? And for me, again, as I look at my role is, and what Mayor Nettle just spoke to, it's about ensuring that every single public dollar that we invest is spent as effectively as possible, and that we know that there's value for money. So it's lacking for me here in all partners, and I'll bring it up for the other partners when we get there, is really that, you know, sort of scorecard type approach where we've got SMART goals, so specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely, that are aligned with our strategic aims as an organization, that are aligned with the library's strategic aims, that we can show progress or that we can show areas where we need further improvement. And we don't really have that. So my request here is getting to the fact that I would love for them to identify what are those key measures that are meaningful to us as a council, to us as a city, to us as a residents, to the library, that we can be measuring and then monitoring and tracking over the next 6 months to say, hey, we're improving here, or we're comparing to other municipalities when it comes to the proportion of people that are members of the library compared to our population. We need some of those so we can actually say, yeah, we're performing well. Our library is doing a phenomenal job, and we need to be investing more, right? That economic return of investment other municipalities have done, showing, you know, every dollar invested generates $5 in revenue. So these are the things that I would like to look at. The percentage of reserve. I mean, I look at their reserve, and I've never seen a reserve that healthy in a nonprofit organization. So again, I don't know what the metrics are. I don't have them right now, but I think if they can identify a couple, and we don't need to belabor it, it doesn't need to be complex. I think, again, those SMART goals that we can then track and measure, and in the fall have another updated presentation that really shows and demonstrates the value and the importance of the library, and where we fall short, there's always opportunities for improvement. So that's what I'm putting forward, and happy to answer any other questions or comments on that.
Are there any questions or comments with regards to the motion from Councillor Hamilton? Councillor Kungle.
Thank you, Mayor Nettle. I'm going to pause on supporting it. It feels more like performance management. I'm not clear about what our role is to kind of require or ask that we share, or kind of being directive about developing performance goals. Maybe they're already there. Maybe it's a different ask. So I'd like rather to see if there's anything in particular we can better communicate to the library around what we're interested in and then asking a bit about their goals. So they've got their own board, they've got their own strategic plan. I don't, at this point in time, see the merit of this, other than it assuming that these things don't exist. Versus if there's something in the presentation, I didn't hear questions pending out of the presentation overall, but coming back to say, what do we as a council care to know? Because it could already exist. There could already be a goal. There could already be an operational progress against a plan. So I'm not supportive of it because I don't believe that maybe there's a different framing of that ask around also clarifying what do we believe the gap is.
That's the comments?
Just a comment, no
Just
question.
comments. Okay, thank you, Councillor Congo. Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nettle. I made a New Year's resolution to talk less, but I think I'm going to talk on this one. I could not support it more enthusiastically. I was lucky enough to witness Councillor Harvey roll up his sleeves with the Barrie Library and get Holly built, leased up, active. Big kudos to staff on the delivery. Big kudos to Councillor Harvey on negotiating and working with the property owner as well as some of the terms and bringing costs back. I'm not going to cite a specific number because I'm sure he'll remember the specifics, but if it hadn't been for him literally being hands-on in a proper way, the number with staffing or something would have come in higher. And that's a project that was much overdue. That's an example of what happens when you align the goals of an external organization and the city, specifically its politicians, and work in unison in order to hit these performance goals. That's what happens. So are we going to assign 3 to 5 performance goals? And, they have till October. This is not an unreasonable ask. Then absolutely it's going to deliver. And specifically because of that example, and I'm going to say the same thing for the rest of the amendments, which means I'm going to have homework on another one. But I can't see myself not supporting this. On the flip side, I've also seen an example on what happens when great external organizations don't align with the city. What happens is previous council spent a couple hours on Zoom discussing whether we should ask for a Zoom meeting to build purpose-built student housing on that one. Luckily, that council at the time voted to have that meeting and further conversations. And like I said before, the relationships are really good right now. But I have an example on what happens when we work in a silo to organizations and what happens when we work in conjunction. And the wording is, in my opinion, appropriate enough that it is working in unison and not forcing our beliefs. So I'll be supporting it.
Any other questions or comments? I'm not seeing any. Oh, Councillor Reba.
I was just going to ask Councillor Hamilton whether she had any conversation with the library people about this. I just curious.
Yes, and through you, Mayor Nettle, I did have my one-on-one with the library as well, where we talked about performance. And again, in my experience of governance and oversight, I don't know any effective board or mechanism that doesn't use a scorecard type mechanism to actually look at performance. It's not micromanaging, it's not getting in operations. It's the only way that we can actually measure and evaluate the performance of one of our partner providers that we're funding. So, I mean, I'm open to comments and input, absolutely, but I do wonder what is another way. Receiving presentations and budgets for me just doesn't cut it. At this point, I really want to identify these are improvement opportunities too, right? There's always opportunities for improvement. So you can't, you can't, what is that saying? You can't measure what you don't know. What you don't measure, somebody say it. Thank you. You can't measure what you don't know. Whew, it's been a long day. So I did raise it with them at that time. Again, this isn't something that should be difficult. If they have a strategic plan in place and their board already has something like this, I would hope they do. And if they don't, I would encourage them to get it. But it's just aligning it. So this shouldn't be a make-work project at all. I think, if anything, it just really helps from a transparency perspective and accountability to the public perspective. And that's what we're here to do.
Councillor Corser.
I was just going to respond to that and say, yeah, I agree. And I think that all of our agencies that we work with, we want to have operate as effectively and efficiently as possible. So I'm supportive of this. I'd also note we have 2 members of this council that sit on the board there, and so that message should get through to that board pretty clearly, I would think.
Councilor Corser, before you speak, I just want to, so Erica just brought this to me. It only took 1 hour and 9 minutes, so that's a very quick turnaround. And we have the last 5 years, I guess year ends, I'm guessing, Austin, is that correct? And there's a commitment to provide the ins and outs, but it would take longer than 1 hour is essentially the status of the email provided. So hopefully that information is forthcoming. Councilor.
The only concern I have with Councillor Hamilton's motion is that the library has mandates in-house mandates that are maybe not aligned, would be aligned with maybe what council's mandates are per se, because they are its own entity providing its own separate service. And through the Libraries Act and all these different things that I've learned sitting on the board, got a real education, that when coming to present in front of council for their KPIs might not be what we're looking for as a council, because their rules that they follow under, and like I said, their goals and mandates as a library under the Libraries Act might not be what we are looking for as a council. And I think that must be kept in mind too, and we're asking to dig into the nitty-gritty of their operations and how they do things and reporting back on KPIs to us. Those KPIs might not make sense to us, and I'd hate to see that be impressed upon how we decide on funding or how we view the library moving forward, because it's oranges and apples sometimes, I believe, and I think that needs to be distinguished.
Councilor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nettle. I was going to say another comment, but it's not a back and forth, but I feel comfortable about supporting this because of the October timeframe. I don't see anywhere in this motion a directive to agree with each other. So the autonomy of the Barrie Library is preserved in what their strategic plan is. And it's been a year, so they have to have a strategic plan, or it's every 2 years. I don't know if it aligns with ours. So they have their own, and I think what the amendment's looking for is come up with 3 to 5 performance goals that reflect key strategic objectives between those 2. And maybe when they come back, they say, we only found 2. Maybe they found 6. I don't know. So I think that's a conversation worth having. It's productive. It's till October, and it's not unprecedented, Mayor Nettle. So, Mayor Nettle, I actually have in front of me a memo from, it was addressed to Mayor and City Council, so it's either public or accessible, from Mark Saunders, the CEO at the time, January 22nd, 2018, requested information. During the Barrie Public Library's 28 budget presentation, City Councilors requested additional information. This request concerned library performance and staffing levels. So, it goes into detail, and I'll just read the headlines because they are dead on what is being asked. Number of facility service points per 10,000 population. Weekly service hours per 10,000 population. Circulation per capita. Turnover rate. Per capita program attendance to see how effective the programs are. Efficiency rating. Circulation per population per square foot. Per capita active card holders, so whether people are actually responding. Circulation per active card holder, so the enthusiasm of each person, staffing, just about hours and things, full-time equivalencies per capita per 10,000, and in the back it has salaries as a percentage of total operating expenses, which I believe Deputy Mayor Thompson was alluding to. This is a public document from 2018. So this data has been done before. This data is probably very easily accessible, and I found this very helpful, which is why I've kept it since then. Addressed to the Mayor and City Council, this is publicly accessible, if not readily accessible. So I'll be supportive of the amendment.
Thank you, Councilor Morales. Councilor Hamilton.
Just quickly through you, I've spent about, 5 or 6 hours researching libraries across the province, the scorecards that use, data that they use to measure performance. So thank you, Morales. You would have saved me about 6 hours had you shared that about 2 days ago. Thank you for that.
We should talk more.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments with regards to the motion? Seeing none, folks, I think that all of our partners need to make sure that they're communicating what their goals are, what their wins are, what their opportunities are, just as we do. In fact, we had a lot of council there today where I was communicating just that to the Chamber of Commerce, right? And so holding other organizations the same level of both transparency and then accountability that we hold ourselves, I think is probably a good practice. And it doesn't have to be combative. It can actually be a really good opportunity for team building between the different organizations, as Councillor Morales actually alluded to with Councillor Harvey's previous requests. And if there's another floor request for new libraries around the city, we can blame Councillor Hamilton because of that and find a way to fund it. With that, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And it carries. Are there any other amendments with regards to paragraphs 2 to 8?
Yes, sorry, I have too many papers in front of me, and through you, Mayor Nuttall. What number is it? Number 3, I have an amendment for number 3 to add the following paragraph, that staff undertake the following actions prior to any renegotiations taking place with the County of Simcoe for the shared services agreement and report back to General Committee by the end of September 2024. 1, a review of the agreement to ensure it's in alignment with the City Council's strategic priorities. And 2, a value for service audit of the past 3 years of the county's financial information with funding of up to $50,000 being allocated from the Council's strategic priorities reserve to undertake this. And I can speak to that as well.
Yes, Councillor, the floor is yours.
I think we got into this actually last week through you, Mayor Nuttall, when we talked to the county and the partnership there. And I think Mayor Nuttall actually raised the idea of putting together some sort of value for money effectiveness review, and the county seemed willing to undertake that as well. So I just wanted to put that on paper, and it speaks to even the same element I'm feeling with the library. I think, again, as a funder of our partners, it is up to us to do some due diligence to, again, ensure that value for money, to ensure the effectiveness of the dollars that we are giving. I think the county relationship is really complex, and I sit on the county board, so I'm privy to a bit more information than council has here, and I'm able to ask a lot more questions there. But really understanding the effectiveness and how well our monies are targeted and managed is difficult. And I do think it's probably timely for us to look at that partnership arrangement and to be able to, again, disclose whether or not, where our strengths are, where we've got good efficiency and effectiveness, and where perhaps there's gaps, because there are gaps. I mean, even the library coming to us and asking for a social worker and hearing that they went to the county, I mean, there's always opportunities for improvement. I think this would be money well spent. I don't normally like bringing in consultants and doing these types of reviews, but in this case, given the amount of funding that we provide to the county, we need to have that level of oversight. We need to do a review to understand how that money is being spent, if this current partnership is working for both parties, and how we can improve or strengthen that. So again, happy to take questions. I think we talked about this, quite a bit last week as well, but hopefully this captures the essence of the conversation and what we're hoping to achieve with this type of study.
Any questions or comments for Councillor Hamilton? Or on the amendment? Seeing none, I think that this, I thought it was a good idea last week. I still think it's a good idea this week. We're talking about a $30 million a year program that we're funding, or set of programs rather, that we're funding. And the idea that we could get better information on where the opportunities lie for better services to be provided, as well as all of the wins that have existed through the services that are provided, is good information for the public. It's good information for our council. And I would just remind members of council, we spent $1.65 million augmenting the already $30 million approved last year over 23 and 24 on supplements to social services. And so we haven't just come to the table as somebody who's saying you're not doing it right. We're asking the question, are we doing everything right? But we've also come to the table as a funding partner to provide more funds to services that just haven't been able to be provided to date. So I think we're a good partner. And I think that we need to make sure that all aspects of this relationship are working the way they should. And if you're not going to do this during a year where there's a renegotiation, then it's never going to get done. And to spend something like, 0.15, and I'm just going through my head, % of our annual budget on a review to understand how the rest of the money is spent, I think is a good use of our resources, and sets the tone, quite frankly, that we expect the same level of stewardship from our partners that we operate under here in City Hall. I know, just looking around the table, there's things that everybody wanted in this budget that they didn't get. And there's things that people got in this budget that they're really happy about. But the reality is we know that we've been held accountable publicly for every single dollar that's being spent, and we need to make sure that that extends across to our partner organizations. So I'll certainly support it and call the vote. All those in favor? And it carries. Any other amendments for this evening on paragraphs 2 through 8? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so we're going to go to paragraph 1, and then we will come back to the budget as a whole. Is that correct or no?
Through you, Mayor Noddle, we need to leave paragraphs 2 to 8 separately, and then have the police budget as a separate motion so that Councillor Harvey is able to vote on the library and the county budget, and not the police budget, and not vote on the police budget.
And in terms of the acceptance of the budget as a whole after the police budget's been approved, is that just automatic, or do we have to have it then a third vote?
I think, looking at the treasurer, but I believe the 2 separate votes would be okay, just because we have to separate the budgets out because of the conflict.
Yeah, for the service part, I agree with that.
Wonderful. So before we call the vote then on 2 to 8, before we get to the paragraph 1, we'll actually vote on the 2 to 8 there, so you can declare your conflict after there. Councillor Harvey, I just wanted to highlight a couple of points here for our budget. The city approved a 0 operations increase. We approved a 2% infrastructure increase. And so before it went to our service partners, we're sitting at 2% in terms of the increase year over year within the City of Barrie. When you add in what has been proposed, I know there's been a reduction at this point. Mr. Miller, where are we at guesstimating for us the neighborhood?
So for the service partners tonight, with the amendment that was passed, it's at 2.82.
2.82. And so I wanted to put this in perspective. We're, I think, here today unable to really dig in when it comes to our partner budgets. But we need to set the stage, and we need to send an even clearer, stronger message on what our expectations are going forward. And I think that's happening through these motions that we put together. So while the 2024 budget, I don't think, is going to show all of the results, it's certainly continuing the work towards having a budget that's a lower tax increase. Now, we don't get to make the choice, but we do get to send the message. And I think that we have done that effectively through this budget. I will also identify that when you compare the City of Barrie's budget to other municipalities, Guelph, 8.52%, Toronto, somewhere around 10%, Ajax, 6.31%, Chatham-Kent, 5.53%, Burlington, 6.68%, Milton, 5.93%. We're doing really, really well. There are certainly going to be municipalities. One I can think of just off the top of my head is Oakville, that's, I think, a little bit lower than us. But when we're comparing ourselves to everybody else and we're putting that whole affordability factor into the light, I think that we are doing really, really, really well. There's lots more work to be done, but we're doing really, really, really well. Councillor Riepma.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to add to what you've said. Many of those municipalities that you're referring to that have taxation rates that are higher than ours are also part of regional governments. They're two tiers. So you're talking about the municipal or the lower tier tax increase, but don't forget there's also the upper tier that also adds on top of those numbers that you're quoting.
Yes, thanks. Some of them are single, some of them are upper tier, lower tier, but certainly we're being conservative in our approach of estimating tax increases. So you're absolutely correct. So I just wanted to make sure that members of council understand while we're doing a ton of work to try to send the message, we're already hitting our stride on this. And I want to thank you for the hard work that you all put in throughout the process. I'm not sure why I had a southern draw there on the word y'all, but I did. And I just want to say thank you because it's not easy. And it's not easy for these organizations coming before the city once a year to say, blah, we have 10 minutes, give us this money. But the reality is, over the next number of months and years, we need to hone in on what the goals are and how the dollars are being used so that we can ensure that that same transparency and accountability exists for them. So I'm going to call the vote on the 2 to 8. All those in favor of paragraphs 2 through 8. And it carries. I would ask that somebody put paragraph 1 on the floor. Councillor Riepma and Councillor Harvey, please.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. In order to meet my legislative requirements under Section 17, Sub 3 of the Police Services Act, I will not participate in the discussion or the vote on this matter in regards to the Barrie Police Services budget.
Thank you, Councillor. Madam Clerk, has the conflict been noted?
Yes, Mayor Nuttall, it has.
So we're now discussing the police budget, which is paragraph 1. Are there any questions, comments, amendments, or anything that members of council would like to discuss with number 1? Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. And through you, I do have another amendment to put on the floor for paragraph 1, that Barrie Police Services Board identify 3 to 5 performance goals reflecting key performance indicators of the city and the Barrie Police Service, with the goals being established by the end of May 2024, and that the Barrie Police Chief provide a presentation outlining the key performance indicators to the Community Safety Committee in October 2024. And again, happy to speak to that.
Floor is yours.
It's in the same vein as the other partners and the amendments that I have put forward in terms of the library and the county. And again, the intent behind these amendments is really to improve the transparency and accountability of public funds. So I'm not holding the police any different to that. Again, I really appreciated actually this year, both the library and the police presentations, the improved data that they provided to us. But again, it really is articulating what are those common goals and how can I, again, for the public say, yes, you know, the money that we're providing to the police, you're getting your bang for your buck, you're getting your value. And I do know we do have different thoughts on how we feel about the police budget. I think a lot of us sometimes feel constrained. I think Councillor Corsa put it very well last week, saying it sort of sometimes feels like an invoice we're getting that we're rubber stamping. And I don't want to feel that way. You know, I really appreciated my one-on-one conversation with police where I was able to dive in a little bit further into some of their financials, into some of their evidence-based policing and the data they're collecting. But I realize that's not a very transparent process. It's great that I had that conversation, and I'm sure many of you had that conversation. I don't know what questions you asked, and certainly the public's not privy to those conversations either. So I think asking them some of those questions and putting it, again, into that scorecard type framework, I'm surprised on the pushback I'm getting a little bit. I've done this for decades and working with boards and how to be you know, effective in their oversight. And again, this isn't about micromanaging. This isn't about you know, disalignment and performance goals. It really is giving them authority to determine what's meaningful to them against their strategic plan. And if there's no commonalities between what they're doing and what the city's doing, that's an issue, right? We're spending millions of dollars, and if they're not supporting our cause and we're not supporting theirs, I mean, there's a disalignment there that we need to actually explore. So if anything, I think this type of, you know, scorecard type review, goal setting, KPI, measuring, monitoring, being able to identify areas for opportunities, that's really why I joined council. This is what we should be doing. So in my conversations with the chief, they're willing to do this as well. I think they've done an excellent job with their evidence-based policing and some of the data that they're collecting. So there is a willingness to put this together for us. I think they have some of this information. And I think, even when they talked about the number of sworn officers in WSIB and their investments into the wellness program, I want to see, is that paying off? When they're talking about, decrease in high harm and implementing high harm reduction strategies, are they working? So these are the types of things that we have to be monitoring to making sure that the investments we're putting in are actually achieving the outcomes that we intended. And for me, this is the only way that we can do that. And again, this shouldn't be tricky or challenging. They should have some of these measures already, but it's making them transparent. It's making them available to the public. It's making them available to us so that we can accurately ensure that we're getting value for the money that we're spending. Even though somewhat we are constrained in the overall police budget, knowing that, if we say no to what they're coming to ask for, they can always challenge that provincially. So we are constrained somewhat, but the reality is we still have that oversight opportunity. So let's take advantage of that and hold them to account for the money that we are investing. Again, happy to entertain questions and comments.
I'm going to start with Councillor Courser and then go to Deputy Mayor Thompson.
I guess just a quick question, because I know that me and the chair of the Community Safety Committee had some items of discussion in cooking up, and I'm just wondering if that would be in conflict of inviting the police to come and present on some KPIs. And I know it's kind of a weird conversation to have. If I'll refer to you, if I could, Councillor Morales? If through you, Mayor Nuttall, sorry.
Yeah, so I'm going to let this go, but one thing I will say is we're now bringing in potential future conversations into a current meeting. This is an item that's on the floor, so it precludes a future item for discussion.
Okay.
But I'll still allow Councilor Morales to answer, because I don't know what the answer is going to be, but we need to make sure we're staying on today and not some other item down the road.
Thank you, Mayor Nettle. Councillor Courser is absolutely right on the idea. She just misspoke about the future, so I'm defending her on that. It's already in the pipeline. It's already been submitted to the clerk. So it's a future just because it hasn't come. This is an idea that Councillor Courser approached me about in the fall, early fall, and she wanted the Barrie Police Service to do once a year presentation specifically to community safety, almost following the New York 1980s model of meeting and be very specific. I added at the time, because we were seeing a lot of downtown issues, saying in the same motion, not necessarily the same presentation, but same motion that the BIA present to the Community Safety Committee once, and that's coming back once a year. And that was just in the pipeline, and then there was just a pause. That's why we didn't see it in November, December. There was a pause, and now it's been reactivated. We have the records of the clerk as of 2 weeks ago, so it's already going towards the task force.
Can I interrupt you for a second there, Councillor? Yep. So I think that if you change the word from once a year to what you may want inside of that item for discussion, I don't think it's in contravention of I don't believe this is in contravention of what you're proposing. Unless you plan on limiting the number of times the police are allowed to come to your committee.
Correct. I don't think it's in contravention. I think it's in complement.
Yeah, I would agree.
And just some clarification, that's not what I was referring to. I was referring to traffic issues, that we were inviting the police and the traffic services to the table. I don't know there was a BIA component to that, but I'm just learning that now.
Okay.
So just for a point of clarification.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Kungl, we'll go to you next, and then we'll go to Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you. Through your Mayor Nettle, just a comment on it. So overall, I'm not ever opposed to kind of having conversations about performance, how money is spent, is it aligned to, what we're funding. But in general, I think it's good conversation. I think we need more conversation about it, which is my hesitation to support it, because performance means sometimes things very different than strategic priorities. And so are we talking about performance management? Are there things messaging we're dissatisfied with? Or is it really about us better communicating to say, we get great reports, you've got your own strategic directions, you're reporting back to us within that process, but is what we really care about just knowing of our strategic priorities, how are you helping us move the bar forward? And I think that's just a different conversation. And then I would say from a process flow, my only comment about, seeing it embedded into different service providers is that the conversations are happening with different committees. And I think there's an opportunity to talk about the how. So what forum would be beneficial to have the conversation, because not everybody, or, is it a different conversation? Why is one going to finance and one going to community safety? So where are we having a collective conversation and asking the same thing of all providers in a bit more of a concise way? So happy to see conversations continue. For me, it's just looking at the process and being clear about what exactly are we really asking, and can we take more time to figure that out?
Would you like, I guess there's a question there.
That's a comment, but I could ask,
Okay.
I guess I'll frame it as a question. Is there any reason why there's not just one global forum, be it general committee or other, versus different service providers going to different committees to have these conversations?
My thought process behind that, through you, Mayor Nettle, my thought process behind that was just looking at, I looked at both their strategic plans and where they would fit and what committees probably made more sense to have that conversation. I don't necessarily see, it will come to general committee, right, and will come to council, so we will have that collaborative discussion, that opportunity, but for me, those committees make most sense in terms of what the mandate is of those organizations and where I think those common, strategic aims and goals could be discussed. I'm happy to have a conversation. I worked with the clerk too to identify what committees made the most sense, but open to comments on that and perhaps change, but that's where I still think probably logically they would rest. And just in terms of how the KPIs are identified, just because you kind of raised some concerns there with that, so just to speak to that, again, I do hope there's some collaborative ways too, right? The library, I want to give them and the police full autonomy to really identify what measures would be meaningful, right? That aligns with their strategic aims, but also supports the goals of the city at large, whether it be safety or whether it be, membership. It's up for them to determine, but absolutely, I hope the chairs of the committees are proactive before they come and present to really say, we can support you in this process too, if you want to sit down and have conversations. So there's absolutely a dialogue, and I think this is about building partnerships, building conversations, building transparency and accountabilities, but it shouldn't be us against them. It should be done together in a way, but I want them to have the full autonomy to identify what it is that they think will be meaningful for them as an organization. So it's not for us to dictate, if that helps sort of ease your mind in terms of whether it's performance management we're getting into, or really just ensuring that our strategic goals are aligned and we're working toward, we're all marching to the same drum here. That's all I'm hoping to get from this.
Yeah, and I'm not uneasy only in that I think it's the how matters, and so I think as long as there's some type of effort tied to this where everyone's being asked for the same type of information, we're not treating one service provider differently, or so if that's coming differently through different chairs, but in general, I think the most important part is probably around how, in what you're doing, do you align with helping to move our strategic priorities forward? And I think that's a great common ground to start from, because otherwise I think we get into the minutia of looking at, is it performance, is it strategy, and I would just like to see us be consistent around how we approach all service providers in the same ask.
Okay, so I'm going to, I think there's a few things that I'm seeing here. One is there's concern about the where, because police are being invited to community safety versus the library to finance. Okay, so the second piece was the invitation to share one's priorities and measurables from said organization, no matter what organization it is. Is that correct?
Overall, and just to simplify it, I think it's just about being clear about why they're coming to which table so they know, like, is our tone more about the finance and financial resources and what they're doing with the money? Or is it just a global ask to say, tell us how you're aligning with our strategic directions and helping us progress forward along these priorities? Then great. But I'm concerned about the how. So my one point is just different committees wanting to make sure that everyone knows that the tone is collaborative and the tone is about, the same ask for same providers.
Okay, so I think for me, and I sorry for jumping in before you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. For me, on the where, it kind of makes sense to me that the police go to where they're going. in terms of the library and the county, I think the county should go to finance for sure, because it's a negotiating year, and we're asking for a financial report and audit back. And for the library, I think that we don't have necessarily a perfect fit in any of the other committees, so it can be argued to me one way or another. I don't really care. At the end of the day, with all of these items and trying to stick to what we're talking about, which is the police budget, when we're asking them to come and state their priorities and to state their measurables of said priorities, part of the message we're receiving is how they identify that. Like, are they identifying these to be outward-facing, inward-facing? Are they picking up the messages that we're giving with regards to financial stewardship? Those are the types of things that just in the presentations themselves, we'll be able to understand what the status is inside of the organization. And so, if not you, sorry, I'm not trying to say it in a negative way, if one were to say, I want exactly this, I think we're actually doing ourselves a disservice instead of letting the culture of the organization seep through in the presentation as to what they hold dear, what they hold to be the largest priority or the biggest priority going forward. And I think we're going to get the most information that way and the most understanding of each organization that way. And maybe I'm naive, but that's how I view it. Let them determine, come and show us, and then if we got more questions, we either work on it for the following year, so we've got something to work towards, or maybe they have the information right there and then. So.
Yeah, I'm fine with the framing. It's really just about being clear about the intention and then the rationale for how and where we're asking for this, but that
Yeah.
I'm fine with.
Okay, and if there's, at some point, if it's like, hey, we don't want them at finance, we want them somewhere else, I think, Madam Clerk, we'll be able to make that happen, correct?
Through you, Mayor Nettle, we could put a further motion on the floor, or between now and next week, if a member wants to have them go somewhere else, we can do an amendment at council next week.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I would actually promote then we just look at community safety for the library and Barrie Police, because I think there's benefit to having a joint conversation and hearing from each other, what questions are being asked, where is it coming from, what's of interest. I think it's of value to both parties, both as service providers, but allows us to be consistent about how we're asking and what we're, like, I just think it's just a bit more streamlined about, let's have a more global conversation with two providers then. If it doesn't have to go to finance to begin with, because there's no necessary concern with financial issues, then I think let's bring them together.
Okay, so I'll take that as you're going to prepare an amendment for next week.
Yeah.
And I'm expecting a bunch of information before then from the library anyway.
Yeah.
So we'll be able to have that whole conversation then, and I think it's a good conversation to have, because if all the financial questions have been answered, I get what you're saying. If they haven't, then maybe we got a different conversation to have.
Right, and on that, maybe finance committee comes up with the metric they want all providers to be sharing in the next budget presentations for the following year. Like, I see that as different outcomes being, how do we do better at what we're asking for, so when we're getting into budget conversations, we're getting more upfront earlier on. And I think it's just fair to both parties, one from providers who, I think if I may paraphrase, you're saying, have done a lot of work, are working with good intent, and we're getting a lot of good information, but we still have a lot of questions. So I think it's also looking at knowing what we really care about before we come into budget deliberations, and being able to dig into that before we're just getting a service provider report, a very high-level presentation, right? Lots of information condensed into 10 minutes or so. And so does it serve us well?
Understood. So I'm going to bring us back to paragraph 1 at this point, if that's okay, which is the police budget. And Deputy Mayor, you were next on the list, like 2 times ago.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. So I will support the amendment. I actually, to me, it is about strategic priorities of this council. We set the strategic priorities, and we hope our partners actually complement our strategic priorities, because we are the elected officials. When the service partners, they're not elected. We are the voice of the people. So if they don't complement our strategic priorities, then it may become a funding issue. Like, you know, we hold our staff to that. We ask for a report, we ask for KPIs, and if we believe in it, we start with pilot projects, we start with a lot of things, and then we continue to fund or we don't. So I fully agree with the amendment. And if you'd like, I'll save my comments about the police budget after the amendment.
Sounds good. Any other comments with regards to the amendment on the floor? Seeing none, all those in favor? It carries. With regards to paragraph 1 as a whole now, as amended, are there any comments or questions members of council have? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. So this is the one item in our budget every year that, you know, it's at times, I want to say 4 years ago, become very divisive amongst our community. And look, the police meet once a month. It's open to the public. They report on all their stats quarterly. And if you attend a police service meeting, you'll realize there's a lot of things the police are the default to. And it's a breakdown in society that they're the default, which if you meet and speak with police, they don't want to do a lot of the things they're asked to do. And, you know, it's reflective of their budget, which is a large amount of money. And we've seen 2 increases in the last 2 years that are a hard pill to swallow. Like, it's tough on our residents because it's our largest line item. But it is so necessary. And, you know, Ms. Reed can correct me if I'm wrong, but we just finished a survey through our online systems and communication and stuff. And it's a large majority that our residents support the police, rely on police, and want to see more of police. So I sit on the board, and, you know, that's full disclosure. I'm the vice chair of the police board, but I understand that there is, you know, some challenges with the board, or the budget, sorry. And the board is aware of it, but there's really nothing to take away from what the police are asked to do. You know, until the systems around accomplish what they're supposed to do, which would reduce the call volume, which then would in turn, over time, would see a reduction in a police budget only by the call volume alone, where every year after year, call volumes go up, the reliance on police, more tasks. If you look at our community and safety well-being plan, you know, it's a large part with the police. Like, we really, like, I can't overemphasize. They are aware of the cost to the municipal taxpayer, and they realize policing is a very expensive service, but a very needed service. So I think that members of council, members of the public should try to attend meetings and see, which will give you some of the results of evidence-based policing and things, the initiatives to try to reduce cost. And in the long run, the investment in the well-being of officers is actually a cost saving to the government.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Are there any other questions or comments with regards to the budget, the police budget? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And it carries. That, I believe, concludes our 2024 budget deliberation for the General Committee portion. And next week, we will be deliberating at City Council. And if there's any other amendments that are going to be coming, I would ask members of council to provide them to the rest of council by maybe Friday afternoon. That gives a couple of days for us to have sober second thought. Yes, Councillor?
Process question for you, Mayor Nuttall, through you to the clerk, perhaps. Is it possible to separate out item number 2, specific to the library, Would that be an evening thing now, or would that be a request next week?
Through your Mayor Nuttall to Councillor Congo, that would be a next week request as you've already voted on the motion.
Okay, so separating it out stays. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So that can be obviously work towards any other amendments you might have. So after the council meeting next week, I'll just remind everybody, there is the strong mayor powers that came in Ontario, which give out a set of deadlines. And so our budget final approval, could someone remind me of the date? I think it's February something? February 1st? Okay, February 1st it is. We're guessing at that, Bob, so don't quote us on that one, but it's in the next few weeks for sure. We'll move past our business into the inquiries, as there's no reports of officers, items for discussion, or information items. So inquiries, members of council. I'm not seeing any inquiries. We're going to move into announcements. Any announcements? Councillor Kungle, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I have two announcements. One is, again, just to make sure this is getting out to Ward 3 and Ward 4 residents. The town hall is on Monday, February the 5th at the Legion off Ferris Lane in Ward 3. We're going to be doing that jointly with Ward 3 and 4. If you're not sure if you're in the ward, because I know boundaries, check out your City of Barrie calendar. The boundaries are there, or reach out to Councillor Corser or myself. We do have Mayor Nuttall speaking with us that evening, representatives from Barrie Police Services, to actually bring forward some of their evidence-based policing and stats. And also in complement to the work being done through city staff, there is going to be staff there talking about waste changes. So we know that there's a lot of communication coming about the changes to waste in some of our providers, and so if you've got questions, do come. We'll have staff there that can do one-on-one and some information about what to expect with the conversion of recycling and garbage and upcoming changes starting, I believe, in May of 2024. And that does start at 5:30 p.m. Please try to arrive if you can on time. Of course, it's an open door, but we're going to try and start promptly at 5:30. The other piece I'd like to make an announcement on, and wanted just to share some information because I think it's of importance and relevant to us as elected officials, but also have seen a bit of media on it, and in general, some movement through Roma and different pieces. So some of us may remember a couple of years ago there was a lot of momentum about legislation to look at introducing, strengthening the Municipal Act so that we could hold elected officials accountable for the behavior. And this was really addressing things that we know exist in the workplace around zero tolerance for harassment and whatnot. There's been a lot of advocacy at work, and if you've been catching some of the local media, I know Councillor Corser and others, and there's been, Simcoe County has had a groundswell of advocates, ongoing interest in seeing this legislation move forward. I wanted just to share an update for those should it be of interest, and I want to thank MPP Doug Downey for being available for a conversation with me. Some of you may have heard, but just to make sure it's getting out there, Minister Calandra has identified that there is work happening, positive work happening on new legislation. So when that comes forward, I think we can look to embrace that. But for those that have been eager to see it, it's great news that this is something that is a priority. And my understanding is, while we all share the same goal in having this happen, there will still be a process when it is launched for the public and others to engage in giving feedback. And so I want to say again, thank you to MPP Doug Downey for, I know he's participating in a lot of that work to strengthen the legislation. And we look forward to seeing that. But again, appreciation, because I believe he'll be giving us a bit of a heads up as to when that can be forthcoming. And that will be, I think, important to all members of all municipalities. We know, I think, over 200 have kind of vocalized support for this. And so it's great news that it's being worked on.
Thank you, Councillor. And certainly it was something that during the election I got asked about as well, and certainly support movement coming on this issue. And I'll just repeat the same thing I said back then, because although I may not completely understand my goal would be that when my daughter or my son come and work at the City of Barrie, if we ever hire them, that they work in a very safe environment. And I say that jokingly about my own kids, but that matters for everybody in this environment, both today and going forward. And so thank you for sharing that information with council and with the city this evening. Obviously, it's been an issue that's been top of mind in our own municipality. Are any other announcements? Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. For those here and at home who think that winter is going to be here with us for a long time and spring is forever away, I just wanted to give you a little information that 14 short weeks from now, the second annual Home Runs for the Hungry charity celebrity baseball game that the Barrie Baycats and myself put on will be happening May the 4th, so it's coming up quick. It'll be at the Barrie Sports Complex, and there will be more details to follow. And a related story, I just want to give a quick shout out to Charlie Beatty. Well, he's 16 now. He was 15 years old when he played for the Home Runs for the Hungry baseball team last year, and was and is the youngest member of Canada's freestyle ski team. I just want a quick shout out to Charlie, congratulate him, because just in the past week it was announced that he will be the flag bearer at the 2024 Youth Olympic Games next month in South Korea. So congratulations, Charlie. That's it.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us, Councillor Nixon. And I look forward last year, and I'm going to look forward this year to attending your event there, and good work in the community, raising both awareness and funding. So thank you for all you're doing, and certainly love to see our councillors active in the community. Any other announcements from members of council? Seeing none, I have a few. The first one is I would like to proclaim January 26, 2024 as Kawasaki Disease Awareness Day. The application deadline has been extended for Barrie citizens to be considered for appointment to the Business Licensing Appeal Committee, the Heritage Barrie Committee, and the newly established Youth Council. Applications are now going to be accepted until February 2nd at 4:30 p.m. For further information, visit barrie.ca/committees, task forces, or email appoint@barrie.ca. The city's annual Winterfest will be held on February 3rd and 4th at Heritage Park and Meridian Place. This year's event will feature winter activities, including spectacular ice and snow sculptures, lumberjack shows, family entertainment, drop-in activities, skating, pancake breakfast, and much more. Please visit barrie.ca/winterfest for more information. Hello Winter, celebrating Barrie's winter spirit, will be taking place during the month of February throughout various locations throughout the city. Hello Winter will feature many outdoor activities, arts, culture, and community events. Visit barrie.ca/hellowinter for more information and planned events. As a reminder, overnight on-street parking and waterfront parking restrictions are still in effect until March 31st. For more information, visit barrie.ca/snow and barrie.ca/parking. The next Finance and Responsible Governance Committee and General Committee and City Council meetings will be held on January the 31st, a week from now. I'll now go to the circulation lists from January 17th. Are there any items on the circulation list from the 17th of January? Seeing none, I'm going to go to the 24th. Are there any items on the 24th of January? Seeing none, I will declare this meeting adjourned at 8:47 p.m. Thanks for all the hard work, folks.